understanding at the time that neuromancer and then just the whole cyberpunk thing was something that could be drawn upon to help develop a vernacular and understanding, or just like an imagination about what this technology was and what it could be, what it could be used for, and what it could become, was engaging. At the same time, I recognized very clearly that that Neuromancer and and cyberpunk generally at the time was also pessimistic. It's not like this isn't a particular kind of science fiction where it's like bright, happy, sunny, everyone lives carefree, no one has to work jobs, or their hobbies are their jobs, or all those kinds of things, which is more in the realm of like some kind of weird. And so that was fascinating to me. It's like, why do they create? Why are they these gritty? You imagine Blade Runner, the gritty future, where it's like, ooh, it looks cool, but it's like, do I really want to live there? That looks kind of fucked up. Like they're these, they're just all that kind of grime and grit. For me, that texture became really intriguing because it had a kind of verisimilitude to it. It had a reality that I said that in my mind I could say like that seems like that could be. And I don't know if it was because it had that grit, but it just seemed much more real given my at the time my 20-something-year-old understanding about humanity. That there will be people who are homeless, there will be dirt on the streets, there will be kind of like slightly fascistic cops. There might be like flying cars and stuff, but they're kind of dinged up. People steal them still, and those kinds of things. And it just brought this kind of like, wow, that seems real. That production design. But at the same time, if you think about that, then you have to think about and wonder about if you're going to apply this set of principles about what this, for Neuromancer, what virtual reality and what the cyberspace deck is and what cyberspace is. You can't just leave behind all the grit and grime. You have to say it's going to have that at some level. And so for me, that was like almost prototypical. The prototypical again. I didn't have kind of representations of the future to say that if it has people in it and if it's meant to represent a future for humanity, it's got to have its expected foibles and kind of like the things that trip you up, and the jacket that doesn't quite fit right, and the car that you left it there and now it's gone. Like, what the fuck happened? Like, all those kinds of things need to be a part of it in order to, for me, I find it feels as a kind of like narrative construct, it feels more real, and that ability to make it feel more real means people are able to insert themselves into it easier and begin to have a conversation about that world and understand it and say like, well, how can we make it better, or will it not be better, or is this a better representation of a future because it has its foibles, so that we can then at least get our heads around what those foibles might be and in some way begin to think through them or address them, or even, holy crap, decide actually maybe we don't want to do this at all. This seems like kind of fucked up because we're going to have like, I don't know, self-driving cars that go berserk at some point because someone hacks into the algorithm. All those kinds of things. You just begin to unearth those. And you don't just leave it at the gleaming, perfect, bling future where everything works well. There's this one bit of very simple image that someone had done as contribution to like kind of kicking the work off. And it was this beautiful, it was like it was a photo montage, but done really beautifully, where it was like, I want to say it was like buildings in Brooklyn, but when you said Amsterdam, I sort of imagined like narrow townhouses. And it was like it was in a future where climate change is taking effect. So there were actually, the streets were slightly overgrown and there was water running through them, but not like a torrent. So it's just kind of like a new normal. And there were people bicycling through it. So it's just kind of like, okay, so now people have adapted. And I'm not saying that this means that climate change will be all fine, don't worry about it, but people adapted. But the fact that it had these contrasting elements between familiar buildings, a signal of like change has happened because now there's this, it's a wet, humid environment, and that people are just kind of there doing what they would normally do. There are no hovercrafts, there's nothing like this. It's just people's clothing slightly changed for the weather conditions, and the bicycles they were riding were slightly different. And that to me it was such an amazing image, just because it signaled so much in a way without having to say like, oh, we're all going to be on like these floating spacecraft kind of thing, or we're going to be wearing, astronaut costumes. It's just life as it is with changed conditions. Again, not in my, at least in my mind, in my reading of it, it's like, okay, that's, we don't want to get there, but that is that is almost a compelling reason to say, would you want to live in this? Maybe there are things that we can do and all that kind of stuff. But I think that's a really that's a noteworthy point that Jake was making about how you actually communicate these things to represent these futures, and it's wonderful that all the whole cast of characters who are in and around this and involved in it have their particular approaches to creating that compelling communication, that compelling representation of it, and all those kinds of things. Irony, humor, a certain kind of like serious unseriousness. I find that a powerful means of expression, and kind of like almost the language intelligence that we use in order to help draw people in is finding the ways in which it becomes accessible, finding the ways in which I'm a big fan of humor generally, but then finding the way that makes someone chuckle to the point where they're slightly disarmed, and so then they almost like relax a moment to actually engage the topic or engage the object that we're trying to talk about. I find that incredibly useful, particularly like in workshop context or in any of the work that we do, because you want to find that way to allow people to to take them by the hand, to bring them through something, and to the extent that humor is roughly like a universal thing. I think that the laugh or the smile initially, as opposed to just kind of like stern seriousness. Well, we got maybe this might be a difficult thing. It helps in that communication, and it's something that just over the however long we've been doing this just finds powerful. But I think aside from that reason, I think I'm just drawn to it naturally. Like if I think of something or write something up, and it could just be like a little description of something that makes me kind of smile and laugh, I'm like, that's it. We have to go after that. So when we did a workshop at IXDA, I think it was in San Francisco a few years ago, and we proposed doing a workshop to create the quick start guide for the self-driving car. So what is the thing? So let's it's self-driving cars, but rather than taking it from this level, like let's just start at the thing that when you open the glove box, there's a little instruction like, okay, so it gives me an overview. I don't need to read that, but just go through that exercise of doing it, so that you then you have to work through so many of the different problems, but you don't have to work through them in such detail that you have to say, well, how is the GPS actually going to navigate in tricky streets? Like it's almost like assume that that's taken care of, just like for the normal human being who just picked up their self-driving car from whoever. What are the questions they're going to have about how to put it into self-driving mode? How do you put it in a manual mode? What to do? How do you sign up for subscription services so you can like lease your car out to Uber when you're not using it? All those kinds of things, like all the little minutia about it. What to do if you left your kid in the back seat and it's already gone off to Uber mode? Like how do you get it back? Like all those kinds of things that inevitably will happen because people are humans, and all that kind of things. I talked to friends who left their kid in the seat, like on the top of the car as they walked into the store because they were having a little family row and just forgot the kid. Like those kinds of things happen. They will happen. And so I think in those, you find those moments of kind of human frailty and human kind of foibles, and just like the mistakes that people know that you want to address in these kind of future systems, but you want to do it in such a way that almost recognizes their isn't that silly kind of moments. Why would someone do that? But they do. And then finding the way in which you can kind of draw people into that conversation so that you can both take it seriously but also have a laugh at it.